Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a meeting of Brant County Council, September the 9th, 2025, 6 o'clock. Attendance has been taken, noting that Councillor Bell is online. The rest of us are here. Second thing on our agenda is the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Pierce has that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we gather, we acknowledge that we meet on the lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the traditional territory of the Adirondack. We remind ourselves that the County of Brant is situated on lands that are full of rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. We recognize the significance of their contributions to the past, present, and future of this land. As a county, we have a shared responsibility for stewardship of the land of which we live, work, and a commitment to the truth and reconciliation calls to action. We commit to continue learning, reflecting on our past, and working in allyship.
Thanks, Councillor Pierce. The third thing on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have anything to add to the agenda? Seeing none, Councillor Kyle.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that the County of Brant Council agenda and addendum of September 9th, 2025 be approved, and that Section 4E of the County of Brant's procedural bylaw be suspended to allow for the consideration of items 12.3 and 16.1 as they are not matters under the Planning Act.
Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda? Opposed and carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does anyone see any before we begin? If one crops up, just let us know. Number 5 is delegations, petitions, and presentations, and we don't have any tonight, which takes us right to number 6, which is the adoption of the minutes of a previous meeting of July the 8th. And Councillor Howes, you have that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Oakley that the minutes from the County of Brant Council meeting of July 8th, 2025 be approved.
Any questions to the minutes of July the 8th? Seeing none, vote to receive the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we'll go to consent items, which is 8.1, which is, there are none. Consent items to be received, there aren't any. It takes us to number 9, which is a public hearing under the Planning Act, ZBA 13-25 RF 233 Oakland Road. I'm going to mention now that this is a public meeting and the meeting is now open. I'm going to call upon Roxanne to come up and present on behalf of the county. It's 9.1.
Good evening. My name is Roxana Flores, and I'm a junior planner with the County of Brant. I will be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 13-25-RF 4233 Oakland Road. The application is to be received as information at this time. The subject lands are located south of Oakland Road within the geographic township of Scotland. The lot has a frontage of 0.1 hectares along Oakland Road, and the subject lands contain one existing single detached dwelling, a pool, and a detached garage with an addition and a canopy. The surrounding land uses include low-density residential, farm and non-farm related uses, and natural heritage. The subject lands are designated as Village Developed Area and Natural Heritage System within the County of Brant official plan and located within the rural settlement area of Scotland and zoned as agricultural, A, and natural heritage within the zoning bylaw 6116. Zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 13-25-RF proposes to rezone the subject lands from agricultural A to zoning to suburban residential with a site-specific provision in order to bring the property into compliance with the current official plan designation and compliance with the zoning bylaw. Now, before I continue to the next 2 points, I'd like to draw your attention to the image on the screen, which shows the existing structures on the lot. This provides visual context for the following 2 provisions. So the yellow square just represents the existing garage, which is legal non-complying. I think On my screen, it looks orange, but on your screen, it should look like a dark red. That's the existing garage addition. And below that, you'll see the existing covered patio. And then on the side there, you'll see the existing reduced side yard setback for 1.4 meters. And as such, the application proposes to rezone in order to permit a maximum lot coverage for all the accessory structures of 228 square meters and to recognize the reduced side yard setback of 1.4 meters. Through circulation and to commenting agencies in review of this application, it has been determined that the side yard setback of 1.4 meters reflects the original setback of the original existing garage, and that the accessory structures have no negative impact on the surrounding residential properties or designated natural heritage features. There are no servicing or access concerns. GRCA permits has been acquired for the structure. Also, please note that the previously encroaching accessory structures you see on the picture in purple, I believe they are, they have been removed. Staff will bring the application forward for recommendation for decision at the September 23rd, 2025 council meeting. And that is all I have for now. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Roxy? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you. Does the applicant want to speak to the application? No? Okay. All right. Well, there were no questions for Roxy, so I'm sure. Does anyone have any questions to the applicant? No. Okay. So with no questions being seen, I'll ask, is there anyone in the room that have any questions or want to speak to this application for or against? And I'll ask for the second time, is there anyone in the room that wants to speak to this application for or against? And we'll ask for the third time, is there anyone in the room that wants to speak to this application for or against? Seeing no new speakers, call the vote. All those in favor? Councillor Pierce and Councillor Coleman. That just keeps it all on the right side of right. All those in favor again? Can we see Councillor Bell? There he is. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on then to 9.2, which is another public meeting, which I'll still declare open. Pierre's going to come and speak to us. It's ZBA 1924-P B202 West Quarter Line Road. And if you want to begin, that'd be great.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is Pierre Bordeaux, planner at the County of Brant, presenting application number ZBA 1924 PB, zoning bylaw amendment to amend the zoning bylaw at 202 West Quarter Townline Road at the community of Harley. The applicant has submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application to permit the establishment of two principal residential dwellings on a property currently zoned agriculture, where only one principal dwelling is permitted under the existing zoning regulations. The subject lands are situated at the northeast intersection of West Quarter Townline Road and 11th Concession Road, south of County Road 202, also known as Harley Road, within the community of Harley. The property comprises approximately 21.43 hectares or 52.96 acres and is identified as a corner lot. As per the County of Brant official plan, the lands are designated agriculture and natural heritage. The surrounding area is predominated by agricultural lands and infiltrated by natural heritage system. As per the County of Brant zoning bylaw 2016, the property is zoned agriculture and natural heritage. Both existing dwellings are located within the agricultural zone. The property contains two residential dwellings, the original and a newly constructed replacement dwelling. Each dwelling is serviced independently with private driveways, wells, and septic systems. The dwellings are separated by approximately 450 meters, and the site includes woodlands and lands designated as natural heritage. The lot area is 52 acres. The lot consists of two north portion and south portion. Northern portion is approximately 4 acres. 2.5 acres are occupied by single dwelling, garage, and landscape area, and the remaining is 1.4 acres are actively farmed. The southern portion is approximately 15 acres. Approximately 3.8 acres have been consumed to construct the newly constructed replacement dwelling, and the remaining are actively farmed land. The remaining of the lot are natural heritage and woodlands. A historical background about this application: the applicant originally occupied a single detached dwelling on the northern portion of the property. A proposal was submitted to construct a replacement dwelling on the southern portion. The county entered into an agreement permitting continued occupancy of the original dwelling during construction. Securities were collected to ensure demolition of the original dwelling upon completion of the new residence. Following the construction, the applicant requested to retain both dwellings. Neither dwellings conform to the county's additional residential units policies, and as a result, a zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted to permit two principal dwellings on the property. As per the provincial planning statement, in prime agricultural areas, permitted uses include agriculturally related and on-farm diversified uses. A single principal dwelling associated with an agricultural operation is permitted as an agricultural use. The proposal to permit two principal dwellings does not conform to these policies. As per the official plan, the adopted official plan to 2023, the agricultural designation supports agricultural uses and normal farm practices as per Section 5, Policy 2.1.1. Residential uses are permitted only if accessory to agricultural or agricultural-related operations as per Section 5, Policy 2.1. The proposed development does not meet the criteria for accessory residential use either. There are few considerations that staff are weighing and evaluating. Agricultural impact, the protection of prime agricultural lands, the proximity of residential uses that might conflict with agricultural operations, if there is restriction on future livestock operation as a result of the newly introduced residential dwelling. In terms of housing and intensification, we assess the alignment with housing policies in agricultural designations and the consistency with designated intensification areas. In an environmental aspect, we evaluate the impact to nearby woodlands, wetlands, or water features. In terms of rural character, we evaluating the rural servicing capacity and infrastructure planning and compliance with growth management strategies. This application is for information today, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. If I can get a motion to get on the floor, please, so we can talk about it. Councillor Coleman and Councillor Oakley. Do you have any questions for staff regarding this proposal? Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. Is MDS a consideration for either residence at this point? Is MDS a factor for either of the residences at this point?
So in fact, MDS has been a factor. The reality is this newly constructed residential unit has been constructed as a building permit. So MDS has been taken into consideration. That's my understanding. But right now, the newly residential dwelling is existing. So it's not part of the planning application.
Okay, just a question, clarification. Is there a livestock operation within? There's not.
Through the chair to the mayor, to Councillor Miller, no, there's no adjacent livestock facility right there that's causing any impacts at this point in time.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying. It could be in the future an impact, but right now there's not. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chambers?
Just a question through you. If the newly constructed residence was the only residence on the property and the property owner applied for an ARU, where could the ARU be located?
Through the mayor to member of the council, there are criteria to qualify a newly constructed residence to be an ARU. One of these criteria is the proximity to the principal dwelling, which is it has to be within the same cluster or maximum 40 meters away or far from the principal dwelling. It has to be within the same services, septic and well. It has to have the same entrance as well. So it has to be within a proximity to the principal dwelling. And the two cases of ARU is only attached or detached. So the newly constructed replacement dwelling does not qualify because the distance is 450 meters.
And just for clarification, the policies that you just stated, is that a mirror of the provincial policy, or is that the county policy? Or does the county policy be consistent with the provincial policy?
It's consistent with the provincial planning statement and even the provincial policy statement 2020. So it's been since 2020, these policies has been introduced to prohibit, strictly prohibit the residential development in prime agricultural lands.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our planner. I think I can only recall one other incident of this type in my 7 years on council. Maybe there have been more. Could you just say how we have dealt with this precedent before, and if we have dealt with this precedent before, and how we dealt with it?
Through the mayor to member of the council, to my understanding, there has not been a precedent in this case. All the other cases where more than one principal residential dwellings been introduced in an agricultural lands were before 2017, before the the introduction of ARUs and the Provincial Planning Statement 2020. So we haven't had any case under the current policies.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I thought I recalled something on West River Road where a property was built on the understanding that the property it would replace would be demolished. And I think it's still not demolished. And I think the issue is still to be decided. Maybe planning team could recall that as well.
Through the chair, through the mayor to Councillor Bell. So yes, there has been an issue on West River Road. Not sure the current status of the structure, but we could identify that and provide some background in when the recommendation report comes back to council.
Thank you. I think precedent's quite important here. If this is the first of its kind, then we should be very careful about the precedent we set. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that have any questions to this application? Oh, okay, before we do that, we're going to hear from the applicant or the agent of the applicant. Sorry about that. Come on up and. You can just state your name and your address, please, for the clerk.
Certainly, thank you. Good evening. My name is Brandon Flewelling. I'm a planner with GSP Group, and I'm joined by Mark and Brenda Roth, property owners. We both have a few things we'd like to say in response to the application. As I'm making my remarks, it might be helpful if council looked at page 45 of their staff report, which is just the air photo of the property. We certainly note this is an interesting request, and I think Pierre did a good presentation. The situation is, as we find it today, there are two homes on this property. This is not a typical agricultural property in that it's separated by a very large woodlot. The original dwelling, located at the north of the property, occupies a very small area of what would be arable land if the home was to be removed. Right now, for example, I think in the presentation we saw that there's about an acre, maybe an acre and a half of land that is currently farmed or has crops on it. The other component of the land has the existing dwelling. And then there's also a municipal drain that cuts right between the existing house and that land that had been historically farmed. A building permit was issued for the new home on the larger portion of the property that contains the bigger area for agricultural operations. So this is a very unique property, and I think going back to Councillor Bell's question about the precedent, every application should be judged on its own merits, as you know, but the context and other features on this property are an important consideration. There are policies at the provincial and local level allowing residential dwellings in the agricultural area. They are, typically one dwelling is permitted, but there are ARU policies, as Pierre alluded to. Our original application sought to apply for a zoning amendment to permit the existing dwelling as an ARU, or to recognize that there are rules in place to allow two homes on the property if one's an ARU, one's the principal dwelling. This would be a unique request, again, from that consideration, but it's taking into context the property, what it's used for, how it can be used, and what it's going to be long-term. This is never going to be a viable standalone agricultural operation just because of the nature of the property. We were directed by staff to apply for a zone change versus applying for an ARU, and understood their logic that this needs to be recognized, and it would be recognized site-specifically. So again, going back to the precedence question, it would be a zoning permission that only applies to this property because of the characteristics. There's an existing example in the zoning bylaw. It's the A10 zone, where there's permissions for 3 dwellings on one property. I don't know the history of that property. I'm not saying it's a precedent example, although it is one that exists. So it's not something that's brand new in the county or in other areas. The question about MDS is a good one. We did look at that. The closest sort of active livestock operation we could find was approximately 800 meters to the south of the property. So in fact, it would be closer to the newer home than the existing home, which is ultimately the one in question if the zoning's not approved. So we don't think there's any MDS concerns with the approval of this application. Again, I think I'll let Mark and Brenda speak next, but I think it's important that we recognize the uniqueness of this property. If the original home is lost, we're not getting a lot of agricultural land back. If you look at the zoning and official plan maps, you can see the property is surrounded by large natural heritage areas. Those lands are not going to become agricultural lands. They are protected. There is a municipal drain. So what we're losing is a viable housing unit. We're not gaining agricultural land. And that's really, I think, the key crux of this specific application in this specific location. Perhaps I'll turn it over to Mark, and then we'll both be available for any questions afterwards, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So good evening. Just would like to thank you for your time tonight, and I just want to also give it just a little background and some history how we got where we are today. So in July 2022, before we even purchased our property at 202 West Quarter Townline, we spent many hours speaking with county staff. Our offer was conditional, that we would, before we would proceed, if we could build a new home, while we keep the original. During these discussions, staff explained that in order to start construction before a zoning change, we need to sign a letter of undertaking and pay a security deposit. That letter states the new house is a replacement dwelling and that the original house must be demolished. Naturally, this raised serious concerns for us. At that point, we were prepared to walk away from this purchase. But staff assured us that this was a normal process being used within the county, and it was simply a mechanism to issue a building permit sooner while rezoning worked its way through. We were told directly that demolishing a perfectly good house would never be required, especially during a housing shortage. On the strength of these assurances, we removed our condition and purchased the property in good faith. In March 2023, we signed the letter of undertaking and paid the $5,000 deposit as directed. With that agreement in place, we invested our savings, built our new home, and received occupancy that November. But then everything changed. So after undertaking deposit and signing our undertaking and paying the deposit, from our understanding, the county introduced or adopted new policies. One of these changes increased the security deposit from $5,000 to $75,000. When we began the pre-consultation to keep the original dwelling, the staff first advised us to apply under the secondary dwelling policies, or the ARUs. We did so, but after some staff changes and further meetings, we were told instead to apply through a zoning bylaw amendment, which Brandon just explained. So we followed that direction, only after we were informed by staff they could not support this and had no further recommendations. So had these policies, changes, and shifting directions occurred before we purchased the property, or even before we signed the letter of undertaking, we would have made very different decisions. Instead, the rules and requirements changed midstream, leaving our family in an impossible situation. This is not just about one property, it's about fairness and trust. So families should be able to rely on the county's own guidance when making life-changing financial commitments. We acted transparently at every step, disclosed our intentions before purchase, submitted applications exactly as directed, and relied on staff assurances throughout. It would not be fair to penalize us now because policies change after we are already committed. Also, it's about common sense and housing needs. We are in the middle of a housing shortage. Demolishing a perfectly good home does not create farmland, especially in this case, where the original house is surrounded by bush and a drainage ditch. In fact, the new home, as Brandon mentioned, actually has more impact on agricultural land than the original dwelling. Removing the old house simply wastes a viable home at a time when housing is desperately needed. when doing nothing to expand farmland. So I respectfully ask council to consider, we disclosed our intentions and sought staff guidance before purchasing. We were ready to walk away, but upon staff assurances and convinced us to proceed. We signed the letter of undertaking only because it was a formality to start the building process. We followed staff direction through multiple application types, only to be told neither would be supported. The county changed the policies after we were already invested. So keeping both homes is consistent in fairness with past and precedent and the need for more housing. I understand this is a unique situation, but council has the discretion to apply fairness and common sense. Approving our application ensures consistency, avoids waste, and supports housing without harming agricultural. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for the owner? Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the agent and the owners, I'm wondering if you could please speak to the nature of the farming operation. Are you yourselves the farmers? Do you have the land rented? And do you farm elsewhere beyond the property that you own here, please?
Yeah, so we do have a couple animals on there, on actually both sides. There is pasture on the north parcel there, just north of the drainage ditch. And as well, on the new property, we do have a few animals, and yeah, we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern before we want to keep investing in a property here, until we kind of know where this decision's going.
Thank you, that's fair. And sorry, did I catch correctly you own the parcel to the north?
No.
No,
Sorry,
sorry,
that's
on the north
same
part of the property.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Miller, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the applicant. Mark, you mentioned you're giving assurances. Were these written or verbal?
So I wish today that they were written. Unfortunately, at the time of, during the offer, these were all verbal communications with county staff. The reason why is because of the zoning change. That's a longer process, whereas once we talked to some of the other staff, they explained to us this is the way to do it, so we could move forward.
Yeah, because I'm not a planner, but I can look at this and say, there's something not right about this, and that's no policies change, that, you know what I mean? So I find it, I don't find it very comforting that you were given assurances, so, but they were verbal. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the room. Is there anyone in the room who wants to speak to or for the, to or against this application? I'll ask for the second time. Is there anyone in the room that wants to come forward and speak to or against this application? And I'll ask for the third time. Is there anyone in the room that wants to come up and speak to or against this application? Noting that this application is for information only, being brought back to staff for review. Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of this application? Wait a minute, Councillor Kyle, did you have?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions for staff, if
Okay,
that's
sorry.
okay. So I'm just wondering, I kind of share some similar concerns to Councillor Miller in that I feel like that it's been a policy to not have more than one primary dwelling on farm properties for quite a long time. So I'm just wondering if staff can clarify how long that has been the case. Because I too, I find it interesting that they would have been given verbal assurances of something that really has been a long-standing rule.
Through the mayor to Councillor Kyle. Yeah, definitely policy over time has always generally spoken to having one dwelling unit on a property. It hasn't been until recently that we started to see the ARUs being introduced, and that's very recent. I think that's where the comment may have come saying that at the time they were looking at the 2 units, we were looking at potentially putting the ARUs into place, but then they would have had to follow the ARU policies, and they took a risk doing anything outside the ARU policies. So from a planning perspective, we've always made it very clear that there's supposed to only be one dwelling unit, which is why planning would have ensured that they went through that agreement to have the first dwelling removed, saying, yes, we only get one, you have to remove the other. There's no guarantee you get to keep 2 units in any form or fashion. even if it was an ARU, we would, and they're trying to claim it as an ARU now, we'd still be in a zoning process, just to be clear too. So right now, either way, this doesn't meet any of the policies or regulations, which is why we're sitting in front of a zoning application in front of us tonight. And just, you know, it's not very unique, like there's lots of properties out there. So just to be clear, if you do set a precedence when you start allowing 2 units on an agricultural property out there.
Councillor House?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just, I guess, follow-up question to Jeremy. It is disturbing to hear an applicant discuss a situation where, from their point of view, they were encouraged to sign a legal document and offer a security saying, we promise we're going to knock down the house. And that from their point of view, that this was encouraged by staff and that they were assured that, don't worry, you're never going to have to knock the house down. Those are pretty serious facts or details being presented as facts. And all I can say is I hope, as this goes through for consideration, that there's some kind of staff notes or records or proof of non-records or something to get to the bottom of this, because it's a disturbing reality here. So just pass that along. Thanks.
Any other comments? Councillor Chambers?
Could I ask the planning director a question through you, Mr. Mayor, with regard to the policy, the ARU policy? The intent of the policy would be to minimize the impact on surrounding properties. That's why it has to be in close proximity to. So the impact on the surrounding properties would be lessened. That, I believe, is the intent of the policy that allows ARUs. Am I in the right ballpark there?
Through the mayor to the councillor Chambers, it's part of that. So the proximity, by keeping it close, prevents it from impacting other properties or future MDS implications if someone's trying to expand a barn and having houses all over a parcel. The other implication, of course, would be to prevent essentially almost creating a severed lot or someone coming in the future to try sever. So there's a variety of implications here, and the size is intended to be reduced. It's supposed to be accessory in terms of size and scale. So generally speaking, a full-on second dwelling unit is not anticipated. It's not supposed to be happening. An ARU is a smaller unit. So from that context too, it's a little different than an ARU in this case, not just by distance, but even just the size of the unit and the implications of it. So it goes a bit beyond just keeping it close.
Councillor Chambers?
If I just a follow-up in philosophical terms, if I might, if the property, if an ARU, if the intent is to minimize the effect on surrounding properties, if a situation exists where there is minimal impact on surrounding properties, if it may not be in close proximity to the existing dwelling, the intent is met, other than it could theoretically provide for a severance if it's not in close proximity.
Through the mayor to councillor Chambers, in some part, yes. The other element you have to take into account is that if you put another unit on a separate portion of the property, you're taking more land out of production. So if you keep the two close together, you don't take as much land out of production. And generally speaking, if you have two separate residential units, you're probably taking at least an acre or two out of production per unit, if not more. So that's the concern also. So there's a variety of, it's not just one item. There's a bunch of items tying together here that you have to put together as to why we keep anything in a cluster as much as we can on the farm parcel and not separate them out, and the implications to it in today, but even in the future, if a neighboring barn was to try come in these location, in this vicinity, there's now 2 houses there, they got to work around where they shouldn't be dealing with that, and that would limit them. Or even other typical compatibility issues in agricultural land with 2 more, with additional house so far from another unit.
Councillor Garneau?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To our planning director, I guess I'm having a hard time with this one because as much as it's zoned agricultural, it looks rural residential. And with rural residential, there's different severance rules applied. Could you clarify the process, given the question about the distance between the houses, as to what would have to happen if we agreed to what's being asked for? What would be the next steps as far as severance? Or who makes that decision and how, please?
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau. So provincial policy would be our governing document as well as our official plan. Provincial policy says we wouldn't sever prime agricultural land to create a new non-farm use. So I couldn't say, essentially by splitting this, we'd be creating either you're going to call one of them a non-farm lot, the smaller unit, if you would say it's, because it's pretty small, or you're saying you're creating 2 farms, but I wouldn't say they're viable farms, and that's one of the tests of the provincial policy statement and our policies is if you're going to sever anything, it has to be viable farming operations and prime agricultural land. So we're talking prime land here, not rural.
Thank you. So if I may follow up to clarify, so the provincial test would be 5 acres. It makes it viable farmland? Did I catch that right?
No, through chair to Councillor Kyle, prime land, there isn't an exact number in the provincial policy statement. Majority of municipalities, including our own, say minimum is 40 hectares to make a viable farming operation. So viable is determined not by what you could run on it today with 1 unit, but what happens if there has to change on the site? How can you run that in the long-term perpetuity as a farm and be viable to make money off of it without having to necessarily go work off the farm, at least hopefully not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm having a hard time with this too. Thank you for drawing my attention back to the overhead of the whole property. I'm trying to imagine the house gone, the original dwelling gone, and I don't see a reason. I don't see another farm popping up or any other land popping up. I see 2 houses quite far away, surrounded by bush, which look like they're both lovely lots to own, and there's just no benefit to a farm. There's no agricultural. To take down that house really is ridiculous. It seems ridiculous when you say it out loud, it's ridiculous. And at some point, we have to be able to count on ourselves as council to make decisions. I know that Councillor Bell doesn't like to start things off like this, but I just don't know why we would ever tear down a farm or a house and leave a piece of property that can't be farmed. It's just more bush and a little bit of land, only suitable for another house to be built on. So we'd be taking down a house with the option of someday severing it and putting another house on it. I think it's wasteful, and I kind of think it's kind of ridiculous for us to think. I mean, we might have to go back. I'm glad it's coming forward to take back to staff for more discussion, because these are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, because I just think it's kind of ridiculous. So if there's nobody else that wants to speak, we've gone around the room 3 times. It's on the floor, it's been seconded. Mr. Clerk, can you read what we're voting on, just so that we all are on the same page?
Through your worship, the motion, or the staff recommendation is as follows. That ZBA 19-24-PB 202 West Quarter Townline Road from GSP Group on behalf of Mark Roth, proposing to rezone the lot from Agriculture Zone A to Agricultural with a site-specific A-XX to permit 2 principal dwellings in agricultural zone where 1 principal dwelling is permitted, be received as information, and any comments/submissions regarding this application be referred to staff for review.
So just to be clear, it will come back to council again. Okay, everyone's clear? Councillor Bell, Claire, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Number 10 is public hearings under the Planning Act. Consider staff recommendations. We don't have any. Committee reports, we have the Agriculture Advisory Committee report. Councillor Kyle, you have that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller that the Agricultural Advisory Committee report and minutes of July 28th, 2025 be approved.
Any questions to the report from the Agricultural Committee? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive the report? Opposed? Carried. Number 12 on the agenda is the staff reports. The first one is RPT 0319-25, Growth Management Data and Tracking. And Brandon, you have a report for us, and I think you're going to control it from your own computer.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to briefly introduce the report, and then I do have a bit of a presentation, a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, with our growth management tool that the model that we've developed. So just before I share my screen, I will maybe just give a brief kind of introduction to this report. So given the growth-related kind of conversations we're having municipally, we know that there's official plan amendments coming forward as well with respect to some growth management. As part of the municipal comprehensive review, one of the implementation pieces of that was to create a growth tracking model. And so this provides a tool with strategic analysis. It was developed by Watson & Associates, who also did our municipal comprehensive review. And the idea is that it provides a kind of a technical analysis for staff to use to support long-term planning, long-term decision-making, and it will provide us the opportunity to report on the technicalities of growth over time, provide council with up-to-date information, provide the public with transparent, up-to-date information on growth. So what you're going to see today, we'll show this is the staff version, and again, this is kind of the technical analysis side of things. I will caveat that by saying we are still doing some data refinement. You'll see there's different numbers kind of floating around about housing numbers and growth numbers and that. We've gotten it to a place where our margin of error is appropriate, but we still are working on some of those refinements. So we're going to focus more on the interface of the actual model today than the data in it. But we can still have conversations about some of that growth data as well. That's no problem. And again, with the future kind of this model, this will be kind of rolled out to staff in the fall. We're going to do some continued training with that. We're anticipating developing kind of a council-facing version to maybe plug into the council dashboard, and then also maybe a version on the website for the public. It'll be far less technical than what you're going to see today, because this will be kind of an overwhelming, I think, amount of information for anyone. Even myself looking at it, it's a lot to sift through. But again, we want to be transparent with our growth. We want people to understand what we as a municipality are looking into, all of the stuff we're analyzing behind the scenes, the kind of integrity of our data. We've done a lot of work, and Lily, who couldn't be here tonight, but is our policy planning student, she's done a lot of work gathering the information from various departments and divisions, putting it all together, trying to see where things align and where they don't align. So there's been a lot of that kind of behind the scenes work going on. So again, why are we doing this? It's for consistency. We need a central view of growth in the municipality. That was kind of one of the important recommendations of the Municipal Comprehensive Review. It helps with informed decision-making, with directions, and in the end, it benefits staff, it benefits council, the residents, and anyone who's investing or developing in the County of Brant. So I'll just bring up the model here on my screen. Hopefully this will show up for everyone. All right. So what is this? This is our growth tracking model, and again, provides technical analysis. And what it does is it looks at planning applications, it looks at building permit information, it looks at servicing upgrades and updates to servicing infrastructure. It uses our growth forecast, so that's the basis of the model itself, is the growth forecasting that's done through the Municipal Comprehensive Review, the kind of macro population trends, whether that be trends for at the federal level, right? How much immigration is happening, migration, intermigration between municipalities, and then it looks at it at a micro level as well, specific to our municipality, specific to the County of Brant here. And we do have a variety of geographical levels. You'll see this kind of on the side here. So it talks about the municipality. We can also look at our settlement areas. For the time being, it focuses on Paris, St. George, and Burford, because those are the ones highlighted in the Municipal Comprehensive Review. It also has information on traffic zones, and those are helpful when the Transportation Master Plan is completed. And one of the additional geographical levels we'll be looking at is the wards. So we would have to come up with a reference forecast for the wards in the municipality, but then hypothetically, we'll be able to pull growth information specifically about each of the wards in the municipality to help councillors relay that information to the public. It helps our clerk with looking at municipal election information, and helps us just kind of understand growth at those levels as well. So that's a forthcoming change to the model we're gonna look into doing over the next year. But for the time being, I'll maybe just run through this quickly. We'll start with our non-residential growth tracking, which is what the page that it's on here. So this looks at our employment tracking, and based on the MCR, there's a variety of different types of employment that it looks at. But generally speaking, it analyzes it by square footage. So when we get building permits in for employment, industrial or employment uses, we would take that square footage, we would take the property size, it gets entered into the model, and it lets us know what our land absorption is, so how much of our employment land is being invested in and taken up, and then the approximate job growth from that. So as we get more information through the application process, that information is plugged into the model and it's refined, so we know more about how many jobs are coming forward. So you'll see here, just as an example, and again, take this kind of analysis with a bit of a grain of salt, but 2021, we had 99% of our tracking to reference ratio. And so when we think of how we track, our reference ratio or the reference forecast is what the MCR used. So the Municipal Comprehensive Review looks at the standardized kind of reference forecasting, and that's what we're kind of expecting from our growth tracking. And then beyond that, we have our actual tracking of the growth. And that's something that the model tracks as well.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you, are we going to wait till the end for questions, or how do you want to do this? Do you want to do questions through, or?
I was going to wait till the end, but if you have questions now that.
I'm good either way. I do have a question, but it can wait. That's fine. Okay. I just didn't want to have them come back, that's all.
Okay.
And I'm happy to do that either way too, but we can.
Do questions at the end, then we'll get it on the floor and we'll talk about it.
Great.
Perfect.
And I'll just kind of briefly go through this, but yes, we can address the questions at the end, that's no problem. So again, just looking at comparisons, so the model will allow us to have snapshots of individual years. So this will be based on building permit data from 2023, and you'll see that, say, for example, commercial growth was tracking a bit higher than what the reference forecast provided. So that just means that we had more commercial growth and more commercial development than what our Municipal Comprehensive Review expected for that year. And then what we would do is look at that on a bigger picture, how that plays into the type of growth we'll see over time. And that's where these kind of percentages come in. So we'll see, like, it won't necessarily go up at the same ratio. There will be other factors that come into play that maybe slow things down a little bit. And then that's where this tool will help us be able to kind of take that real-time analysis and translate that into policy directions and policy changes that may need to happen. I'll speak a bit about this residential growth component. So there's a few different components on here that are related to residential growth. So we have a residential growth tracking page. And again, that's kind of the high level. It provides information on population versus our housing. And so one of the things that I'll point out here with population versus housing growth, we're seeing the population go up faster than we're seeing our housing growth go up. We talked about this during the housing needs assessment. That kind of, the assumption there is that there are more people living in houses. So we've seen our population go up faster than our actual housing unit count. And so that's just an example of what the model will be able to help us with. And we can have those conversations with Watson and with other folks in the corporation to see what type of assumptions we should be making. And again, making adjustments to policies and directions as time goes. One of the things I'll point out on the side here, so there's something called the scenario builder involved in this model. And what that allows us to do is put in hypothetical situations for growth. One of the probably most relevant ways that we'll use this is for build-out opportunities. So opportunities in settlement areas that haven't seen full build-out or have a decent amount of land left for development, we'd be able to plug the information in for the build-out of that settlement, and it would help inform, for example, when we would need to see servicing upgrades, when certain demand would happen, and helps us kind of decide on a phase or stage for the growth to happen over time. So there's a variety of ways that we can use this, but the scenario builder, that'll likely be the most kind of important piece to us, will be kind of full build out of settlements and the idea of focused growth in infrastructure, determining over time what that growth looks like in a certain area. We also here have an application tracker, and this is probably when we do work on the public and council-facing documentation. This will probably be the biggest piece of that and the piece that probably we get the most questions about. What kind of growth is anticipated? So what this does is it plugs in all of our development application data. It tells us how many units are planned, hypothetically, how many permits have been issued, and what we would do is set a date and time or stamp in time. So this for right now is from 2021. That's how many permits have been issued since that time. And then it kind of tells you the absorption of, they call it the absorption of the housing units. So how many units have been built and how many remain in the planning stage. And this is when I referenced some of the numbers being different. This is where we're still ironing out some of those details. For example, I was going through the list of the developments today, and I found that 2 were missing from the model, but they were in the list that was provided to council. So again, we're just kind of sifting through that information, making sure that it's accurate before it is all pushed forward to help us make those informed decisions. And just of interest to folks might be the fact that it does break down our densities here. So we talked about this during the housing needs assessment. Low density is generally singles and semis. Medium density is your townhouses. High density is apartments and additional residential units. And so it shows you what's planned versus what has been developed. And I'll just show this as well. There's an example here of the detailed summary of our development applications. We're working kind of on how this looks and how this shows up, but you're able to organize it by, say, the total density. So we can see here there was an application made for 884 units. That's the largest one that's sitting. None of them have been built yet, so that makes the absorption rate 0%. And it goes all the way down to some of the smaller developments as well. So you'll see some here for 10 or 12 or 15. So the idea is that we're not, or the idea is that we're tracking all of the development regardless of the size, and making sure that that information is available to everyone. I'll just stop maybe with that piece there. And what I'll say then is just, again, we're going to be rolling this out more as we go. This piece that we're showing, again, is kind of the internal version. That's the stuff that staff is using to help roll things out to council and to the public and tell that story of growth. I think that's our end game with this, is to really transparently tell the story of growth with the county. It will also help inform things like the infrastructure needs. We'll get to see, say, when water capacity, we've noted we need an environmental assessment. That stuff will be captured by the model as well. It will also help with the long-term financial planning. That stuff's been integrated together. Watson's working on both of those projects, so that's being, that consideration's being included here. But again, this is us trying to be proactive and transparent and data-driven with growth management. And we're excited to share this today and to move forward with our official plan amendments for the growth management stuff. And we'll be having more of these conversations in the future, but I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any comments that council may have.
Well, thank you for that. Maybe we should have taken questions halfway through it, or maybe a couple of times. Let's get it on the floor first. Councillor Oakley and Councillor Howes. Councillor Howes, you're going to speak first, and then Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Brandon, to you and everyone who was involved in putting this together, because it's a very valuable tool. And I don't love the picture that it paints, but I'd rather see the picture and its reality. And you talked at the very beginning of your presentation about transparency, and I think this helps us deliver that transparency. I believe that managing growth is the single most important topic in the eyes of and the minds of our residents. 6 years ago, we tapped the brakes because we thought then that the pipeline was already full enough. And I think we learned fairly quickly that ends up becoming an expensive position to take because developers take us to the OLT and we can spend millions of taxpayer dollars on trying to defend those situations, and we rarely win. But your chart on page 6 out of 7 of your report shows that St. George and Paris will double in population based on the pipeline that's here. And I know that poses a lot of concerns to people. So a couple of my questions are, it seems like we're already far exceeding the minimum growth requirement that we have to achieve by now in 2059 in terms of we know there's already 9,000 units in that pipeline. And then I'm also wondering, because this tool is so valuable, I'm wondering how could this tool be used? Can you walk us through it a little bit? There's a perception amongst many people in the public who think that we're allowing growth ahead of the necessary infrastructure. And this tool that's been developed really helps to illustrate the patterns that are coming for growth, and how do we use this to help show people that we can make sure that the infrastructure is ahead of the growth?
Through the mayor, so thank you for that. I'll start with, I guess, the note about slowing or restricting growth. I guess the long story short with that is there really isn't a way to restrict it. Slowing it, we can manage it. That's maybe the better term for it. And I think there's an opportunity as well, knowing where we stand with the amount of growth that's been approved, to leverage the way in which we're approving applications. And that's something we'll see come forward more with the community planning permit system. There's an aspect of that called community benefits. And so when we've approved growth already to a point where we know we will meet our minimum standard from the province, there may be an opportunity to ask for some extra benefits, understanding that we planned for the minimum in a way, but we're also planning beyond that. So what does beyond that look like? This model will help us do that. That community planning permit system will help us do that. And I think what the messaging there will be is that the focus is shifting a little bit. It's shifting from, okay, we're stopping growth. That messaging or that opportunity really isn't there. And quite frankly, it shouldn't be. We do need a certain level of growth to maintain viability in a municipality. But then we're going to focus on what that looks like, what growth looks like, and how it can benefit the community. That's the shift that we're seeing kind of in our messaging. That's the shift that we're trying to work on with this model. We know that things have, growth happens in a way that not everyone's going to like it. You'll never find people, not everyone is going to like what is happening to a changing place. Everyone wants to be the last house on the street in some instances, and we're all guilty of that. I'm the same way. I moved here from a different place. But I think that is, that's the reality that we're trying to face here as a municipality, to address that and understand that growth is coming. So let's make it work for us. What does that look like? That's the input we want from the public. It's helpful when we get those types of responses from people on planning applications. That's why we host council meetings and planning meetings for people to come in. That's why we're looking at the alternative measures for our public feedback, to encourage people to provide helpful input for growth and about growth. So restricting growth, there's ways to manage it. I guess that's what I'll say to that. And that's something we are acknowledging as staff, and we're trying to help provide that focus and get that messaging out there for the public. With respect to the growth happening ahead of infrastructure, this model will definitely help with those types of things. It will help provide that information to the public. Again, everyone has a different impression of what type of infrastructure should be in place before growth happens, and some people like roundabouts and some people don't, and et cetera. But the conversation and this idea of centralizing the growth data will really help with the corporation's efforts to move forward and have all of those projects kind of looked at over the long range. And that's the idea of the long-range financial plan, right? There's a lot of long-range kind of planning happening in the corporation, and I think we're going to see a lot of benefit from that over the next little while.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, if that's okay. So the other valuable piece I saw in your chart, the chart on page 6, talking about the pipeline, and you broke it down into densities, low, medium, and high densities, which was particularly valuable. When's the right time, and it's not necessarily tonight, but when's the right time for us to talk about trying to determine strategies to influence the developers to build the types of housing we need rather than what's most profitable?
Through the mayor, what I can say is that those conversations are already happening at a staff level, and with the applications coming in, we know there are certain kind of crucial moments when an application comes up for renewal, for example, to start having those conversations. The shift that's happening with the market, CMHC released some information today on housing starts, so we keep an eye on all of that. It talks about, actually, that information is quite interesting. It talks about a shift towards purpose-built rentals. Developers are starting to see the benefit in investing in kind of a longer-term plan through purpose-built rentals, hanging on to that supply because that's something that they can make some money from. But then again, that's also a benefit that we know through our housing needs assessment. We need purpose-built rentals in the municipality. So when the benefits align that way, I think quick action on those things is beneficial. And yeah, those conversations, we'll see some of those, I think, happen more frequently over the next little while, and we'll continue those. But yeah, they are already happening, and that'll be stuff I think that will go out to the public and we can ask for input on very easily.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brandon and whoever else says, Councillor House says, thank you for all the information in this report. It does paint a picture, that's for sure. And when you talk about, it's data-driven, it's transparent. The data being transparent shows us we're blowing the numbers out of the water. So, and I know you know that. I know everybody knows that. It's reality, and when you see it on paper, it really comes to light. So, a couple questions I have. At the start of your presentation, you spoke about for employment jobs to square foot. So, with this model, does it factor in? Hypothetically, we've got a manufacturing employment over here and we got a warehouse over here. Obviously, the manufacturing is going to employ more than a warehouse. So how does jobs to square foot factor that in? Or is it like, so it's not truly, if you got 100,000 square foot, it's going to have this many. It's still a factor of what it's going to be, correct? That has to be in there?
Through the mayor, yes. Yeah. It uses similar assumptions from our municipal comprehensive review and an employment area analysis, which provides different kind of high level, so for industrial, different types of industrial, and then the average kind of jobs per square foot for those.
Okay, perfect. And that's great. And then you had mentioned that in one of the charts there that, the population growth is higher than the housing growth. Again, I just want to confirm, it must, but I just want to confirm here that it takes into factor, let's, again, hypothetically say we built 100 houses. Let's say that 50 of those houses were 1 bedroom and 50 of those houses were 5 bedroom. Obviously, that's factored in there too. So again, it's not just units built, it also factors type of units and that sort of thing, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it looks at the type of units, and we also have information on the square footage based on the building permits.
Perfect. I just wanted to get that out there. And then in the chart that you have there with all the everything that's in the pipeline and you list them all, that's fantastic. Because again, when you see it in front of you, it really brings it to light. But I'm wondering how much work it would be to potentially, instead of just the numbers of what it is, actually the names of the, whether it's the north of the Cordon Lands or wherever it is, just so we can get an idea of where these units are just as opposed to just numbers, because the numbers mean nothing to us. I don't know how difficult it is to do that, or if that's possible, but if that could be an addition to that, that would be great.
Through the mayor, yeah, just a quick comment on that. So it has been quite difficult, but it's something we're working on.
Okay,
and
perfect.
we're aiming to provide that as well in future updates.
Okay, perfect. That's that one. That's that there. I'll leave it at that for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Oakley, you're next.
To you, Mr. Mayor. Are we just doing questions right now or comments as well?
We're receiving it as information, so we can do some comments too.
Okay, for sure. So in that regard, I just wanted to comment, like a lot of my peers have here, that this is a fantastic report, fantastic tool. I love this type of informational analysis stuff. I'm in love with this tool. This is awesome. And I'm really looking forward to how we can use it to sort of direct and manage our growth. I think, to your point, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities on how we can direct and make the growth work for us. Just sort of along the comment side of things, just sort of building off of what Councillor Howes was talking about and sort of referencing, Councillor Howes made a Facebook post about this meeting and this report that we were talking about today, and there was lots of good comments and discussion on there. And I was thinking to myself over the weekend there's a lot of comments whenever we talk about growth from folks who are like, I've lived in Paris, St. George, Burford, whichever, for X, Y, however many number of years, and I've not seen benefit to the growth. What are the benefits for me? And I think part of our communications challenge going forward with recognizing that it's no longer possible for us to stop growth. I think that bridge or that ship sailed when the 403 was built, and I think I was about 6 years old at the time, so a little young to be able to do much about it. But acknowledging that the growth does have to happen, I think part of our communication challenge is going to be communicating to those folks who've been here a long time how this growth works for them. And, we've talked recently a lot about, the benefits we get out of going to conferences, so on and so forth. I think one of the benefits there is we talk to folks who aren't experiencing the growth that we're experiencing, who are in fact watching their community sort of shrink. And the impacts that has, and they're very jealous and they wish they could have the level of growth we have. So I think there's a challenge there, or an opportunity there to explain how this growth, as much as now we can't stop it, how we can make it work for us, and how in fact it is a benefit, no matter whether you're a new resident, old resident, however long you've been here, it does benefit you. So I think there's an opportunity there. So that would be my 2 cents. And yes, I love the software.
Thank you. Councillor Gurno, before you go, Councillor Bell's first, and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't get quite as emotional as Councillor Oakley about the plan, or the model rather, but I do like models. And I think they're an absolutely essential tool for us to be able to manage forward, whether it's a tool like this for managing our growth, or a long-term financial plan, which allows us to manage our finances going forward. These are absolutely essential tools for any self-respecting municipality to have, and I congratulate staff on getting both of them into place. A couple of questions, if I may, for Brandon. In page 3, you talk about the province is shifting away from the growth plan. Can you just, for the benefit of people who are listening to this, say what the growth plan is or was, and why the government is, or why the province is shifting away from it?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, and to the rest to explain what the growth plan was. So the growth plan was introduced in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and the intention was to provide a particular plan for that area, a high-level plan to direct growth of an inner and outer ring of municipalities. County of Brant was one of the outer ring of municipalities. When you think of the Golden Horseshoe, the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Greenbelt Niagara Escarpment, that was kind of the line between the inner and outer ring. So that just gives a sense of the geography. At a high level, that growth plan was managed to be the growth management strategy for the area. So now that the province has shifted away from that, what they're anticipating of doing, they recognize that growth plan maybe didn't apply well in all of the areas it was applied to. And there's also other areas that it didn't apply to, and they felt a bit left out by it. So long story short is that plan has been repealed, and they have shifted through the new PPFs, the 2024 PPFs, to a more localized planning framework. So with respect to growth, we won't rely on the growth plan, which is what our OP does right now, and that's why it's necessary to come forward with these amendments to the official plan to kind of fill in the gaps that the growth plan, now that it's been repealed, fill the gaps that have been left. And we have the benefit of looking at it at a more localized scale. And so what applies to Mississauga wouldn't necessarily apply to Burford. Under the growth plan, there were some similarities that way with respect to what we were applying. So that makes things difficult, just gets the sense of how we as planners are trying to kind of juggle that and manage that framework.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, Brandon, does that translate simply into saying the 59,000 target that we had in the build up to the official plan really is almost irrelevant now, and the government is really encouraging us to build as fast as we can and as much as we can in settlement areas that are municipally serviced?
Through the mayor, so I wouldn't say irrelevant per se. That 59,000 residents still holds true. That still is the new PPS refers to the repealed growth plan and the opportunity to continue using that 59,000 number. But then the idea is that the municipalities will still take on those growth exercises, the land needs assessments. They'll use the Ministry of Finance's projections to inform that, and then that would become the basis for the growth management and how much growth the municipality is going to expect. So I guess there's a difference here between the expectation, so what we're projecting for growth, and then the idea that you can go beyond that, where we heard it tonight with the housing issues. There's a housing crisis, and we're looking for extra places to put people and to attract jobs and build housing. So that's an opportunity for any municipality to go beyond that number. But again, that 59,000 will hold true for us as kind of our minimum base.
And just to take your figures, it looks like you're pitching now it will be 63,000 if your tracking forecast is correct.
That is correct. Through the mayor, we are tracking a bit higher right now with respect to population growth. We could see that be adjusted in the next couple of years just based on the market. But yeah, as of right now, we will be a bit higher than that.
And so there's a reality check in all of this. The growth is actually coming to Paris. It's coming to St. George. And if you look at the numbers in your table that Councillor Howes referred to, I think if I read it correctly, your tracking forecast says that in the next, up to 2051, there are going to be something like 8,000 new homes in Paris and St. George and 475 in rural areas. Is that a fair assessment, understanding?
Through the mayor, I'd have to verify the numbers a bit more specifically, but yes, there is the high-level assumption is that I think the rural areas would see 20% of the growth in total at a maximum, and then the rest of it was to be allocated between Paris, St. George, and Burford. We are seeing that those numbers not align, and part of that is because of the push from the province and from the municipality to focus growth towards areas with infrastructure. So that's why we'll see a bit of that kind of fluctuation right now. But again, it will realign itself because we know that there is some infrastructure holdups in these areas, and that will act as a natural kind of management to growth as well.
But it looks more like 5 against 95% rather than 20 against 80%. Is that a fair understanding?
Yes, that is a fair assessment of that information.
So the implications of that, we've had this conversation, this conversation has tended to grow over time, that Paris gets everything. It'll be Paris and St. George getting everything, because Paris and St. George is where 95% of the growth is going to come from. And I think there is a reality check in that for all of us on council, that we need to recognize that if we're thinking about equity, who gets what of property tax funding, the need will come to more so to Paris and St. George, where population is growing. And I'll end my comments at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, recall a couple weeks ago, perhaps before the summer recess, The question was asked of Byron Tan from Watson about whether growth pays for growth, and we heard that 30% of the cost of growth are borne by the existing taxpayers. So while I don't want to go down the rabbit hole as far as responding to Councillor Bell's statements, we do need to be mindful for both communities that we're making equitable decisions. I could definitely, on the other hand, fall down the rabbit hole of the data dump as far as exploring and modeling things out. What I wanted to ask is, does the model differentiate between units that are basically approved versus built versus occupied? Because when I look to one of the charts that talks about things to be built, sometimes there can be a long time between that. Are we tracking how long from when we issue the building permit to when occupancy is given, and if in fact people are now living in the home? Sort of the reason I ask that is, can we use the model to signal perhaps what the economy is doing more broadly based on kind of the pace at which things are happening, start up, slow down? We seem to be in a bit of a contraction as far as growth, because certainly things being approved from a development standpoint versus things being under construction, there can be a long time there. So I wonder if you might respond to that, please.
Of course, yeah. Through the mayor, with respect to the timeline of how individual applications and developments move forward, that is something we're looking at with the model. It doesn't quite, it looks at that information, but we don't have it all kind of spelled out specifically. But we've made that note to our consultant, that the kind of timeline that we'd like to look at and be able to analyze starts at our pre-consultation with the discussions before an application's even made. We want to know that timing. We want to know the application submission timing, the actual approval, and then you have your building permit or your planning application, your building permit application, your occupancy, your servicing, right? So there's a full kind of spectrum that we're looking at that way. So that is, yes, I guess the short answer to that is it's on the radar.
Thank you. So if I may comment on that, I think it's, what I hear is that sometimes this can take a very long time, and so I acknowledge that for many of our more urbanized communities, seeing the numbers today could be unsettling, but I think we also want to make sure we're not counting our chickens too soon, because they're not all going to show up at once. Yes, chickens. Yes. But as well from a financial standpoint, that we're not anticipating tax revenues before we see them, because we certainly know that some of these developments have already been a long time coming, and they're going to be a lot longer before we're actually built out. So I want to make sure that as we figure out how to communicate the conclusions we're able to draw at different points from the data, that we're mindful that it doesn't just indicate things are going to happen right away. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One meandering comment and one question. At AMO, there was a big presentation about the Building Canada Fund, whatever the former gas tax is now. And you could click on any municipality and you could click on a project and it show you how much come from the gas tax. But then they start delving into this model, and I don't remember the website, but you could also click on municipality and look at their official plan. And they said, and then you can also click on and see their housing needs assessment. And they clicked on Brant, and up comes, the one you just presented a couple months ago. So I thought that was pretty good. They're emphasizing the importance of it, and it is important given the amount of work we did. So it's good to see from your answers to the questions that this will help us meet, our housing needs assessment. My question then, I see a lot of this helping a lot of people, obviously internal staff, developers, counselors. But one of the big users, I think, of this would be the school boards. And I think that they're maybe not keeping up with the number of new schools they need to, the number of new schools they're putting in doesn't seem to be keeping up with the growth. And if you look at the number of portals going up, it's, a brand new school, right? And then 2 years after it's up, they've got, 10 portals out back. Somewhere in this report, and I don't remember where, you mentioned that you might have a training session for internal staff and the planners and all that. Any thoughts of inviting the school board planners? Because I could see them really getting a lot of good use out of this.
Yeah, through the mayor, that's, a great note. And I know a lot of the school board planning in our area is done through Watson, who has put this together as well. So yeah, that's definitely something we can raise with them and suggest that. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pierce, you're next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just found one other question I had here, Brandon, on page 407 of your report. When you speak of, it says, key functions of the model to build on these components provide staff with the ability to monitor residential and non-residential growth data with real-time updates. So can you clarify real-time for me?
Through the mayor, the idea of real time will change over time. Right now, we do a one every month update. The idea, though, we do have the ability to do it, is that this will plug directly into our databases, and then say every night it updates the information. So it's being integrated with City View, which we use for our planning and building permits. It's being integrated with our GIS at a greater level. So that idea of real time will shift a little bit, but right now it's a monthly update that we perform with Watson.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that's actually better than what I thought it was going to be. So thank you.
Councillor Oakley, I'm going to let Councillor Chambers speak next, then I'm going to come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brandon, I would agree with the rest of the people here that the tool, it's an excellent tool for planning for future infrastructure and, like Councilor Miller says, school, that kind of thing. But I think you'd agree with me that growth itself is dependent upon developers making applications and OLTs making decisions. So my question is, if we're worried about managing growth, how does this tool influence, or can it be used to influence the developers when they make their applications for growth? And can it be used in defending council positions at the OLT where we're taken by developers who have made the applications that are responsible for the growth?
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers, the short answer is yes. Because it's based in the, that's all you get. Because it's based in the policy, sure. Because it's based in the policy of the official plan, and we're going to be strengthening those policies through our growth management updates. The idea is that the reporting of the growth management information, that will all be able to be used as supporting information by staff for recommendations, by council for decision-making, for the conversations with the individual developers. And again, when I spoke of the community benefits, there'll be this idea of being able to leverage some of that information to see where we can provide benefits based on the growth. So the short answer is yes.
So just to follow up, so if I understand that correctly, you're saying the tool can be used when we do official planning, the official plan, which does have an impact on developers that make applications and strengthens our position at the OLT when our decisions are appealed by the developers to the OLT.
Correct.
So that would be the yes.
Yes, yeah. It will, what it will do is help with data-driven decision-making. So we'll have the data to back up the decision-making in the end.
Councillor Oakley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to pick on a comment there, or a thread that Councillor Garneau highlighted. Councillor House also kind of referenced sort of the other side of it, and how this tool can be used. And I think there's a very interesting sort of philosophical question that's going to come for us out of how we use this data to inform our decision-making. Councillor House referenced, on one hand, folks talking about, why didn't we build the infrastructure before the development happened? Councillor Garneau highlights sort of the other side of things of, if we invest in the infrastructure and then market changes and we don't have that growth, now we have a disproportionate sort of tax impact of that investment. In theory, had we had this tool 10 years ago, all the work that we're doing right now that is very disruptive we could have done a decade ago, it would have been much cheaper because of the cost of inflation and so on, but then perhaps this growth wouldn't have happened. So I think there's a really interesting sort of philosophical discussion on how we use this data to inform it, and I think it's something to have that conversation with the public too, where they say, we want to see infrastructure in before the growth, and the realities of what that costs, especially if the growth doesn't happen how we imagine it to, versus the sort of more conservative, I think to reference Councillor Miller, where the school boards, my understanding of how they do their planning is the logical extreme of don't count your chickens before they hatch, where they only build to what is the current growth. They don't work on projections at all. And I think all of us around this table, not that it's our jurisdiction, but as we've heard through many members of the public at planning meetings, I think people would agree that it doesn't work because we're far outside of our capacity for schools. So I think there's a really interesting philosophical discussion to come out of this tool and how we use that to inform infrastructure growth and development.
Thank you. Councillor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. First of all, to echo the comments from many of my colleagues, Brandon, I think this tool is fantastic. I'm a little bit like Councillor Oakley, and I like the dashboard and like all of the numbers and digging in. So I think that there's definitely, I don't know, to me it seems like it's like a Fitbit or like an Apple Watch for the county, right? Instead of counting the steps, it's counting the houses and the infrastructure, and you know, are we keeping pace with what we're supposed to be doing? So I think Councillor Howes maybe touched on it a little bit, but this could be a big interest to the public. So I'm wondering if you could speak to whether or not there will be a version of this available. So if someone wanted to go and check out what's going on, do they have to come through us, through staff, or will there be an opportunity for, even if it's not the same, like all the crazy data, which obviously could be confusing to someone who doesn't necessarily know all the ins and outs, but is there a version that could be publicly accessible?
Through the mayor, yes. The intention is, again, kind of along the transparency note, to make their dashboard or a version of this accessible to the public, maybe a bit more detail of a version accessible to council, and then this kind of overly confusing version for staff technicalities available to us. So there'll be different levels that they can come to get that information, and we'll do some consistent reporting on that. But the idea isn't to gatekeep the information by any means. It's just to provide the technical analysis that needs to be done on that information and make sure that is being accurately displayed.
Yeah, so we'll finish it off with Councillor Pierce.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just something to add on to that. I think it's fantastic that the public will have access to it, but you say it'll be more of a condensed dashboard for the public. We need to be careful with that too, because we need to have some sort of context. We can't just put a dashboard up there and then they're going, well, what the heck does this mean? You know, so there has to be, you know, in all honesty, maybe the let's call it the full Monty. We're talking transparency, right? Let's put it all up there. If they can, there will be some people out there that will be able to understand it. Like, I'm not saying that there, you know, everybody will or everybody won't. But what I'm simply saying is the fact that if we put a condensed version up there, it may bring more questions than answers. So we need to be careful of that. I am full support of it being available to the public, but there's got to be some context around it so it's not just numbers to them and they're freaking out going, well, what does this mean? What does this mean, right? And just finally, to the point like Councillor Garneau said, and you mentioned earlier, if they're seeing these numbers, but there's no context there that, you know, let's just hypothetically say, you know, 1,000 of those houses are going to be built, but they might not be occupied, which is, you know, that's important information that has to be in that whole package on there for them to understand it. So just my point.
Okay, I think we've given this enough time. It's only coming to us for information at this point, so I can't even imagine the conversation when you want us to sign the papers. But you know what? The people are the ones that are going to win. I mean, there's so many rumors out there and numbers that people don't know, and you know, St. George is going to do this, and Burford's going to do that, and Canesville is going to explode, and all of these things. So I think it's right, and I think that Councillor Pierce is right. There's going to be lots more phone calls, but that's our job, is to know the answers. So I think that the people will win because there's just too many things floating around out there right now as to what's going where and when. You know, in St. George, we think we're going to get them all here and them all there, and here them all there. Well, the whole town's going to be filled with Harveys and Wendy's, and I mean, I'm sure that's going to come someday, but it's not going to be on day 1, 2, or 3. And I think that's what people have to know. Everything's at their own pace, in sequence, and it will happen, and we can't stop it. Councillor Howes asked the question, and we can't stop it. We can only do what we can do, and that's what we have to say out loud, because it's just the truth. So if that's enough conversation on this, what's in front of us is to accept the growth management data and tracking to be feed for this council just as information. Call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you, and thank you for all the work, Brandon. I know it was an awful lot of information, but we can go back and forth and get more familiar with it, and I do believe the public will be served with all these numbers. The next thing on the agenda is 12.2, which is RPT 0332-25. It's a report, and Michelle, oh, here you are.
Good evening. Not as exciting as growth tracking, but definitely an interesting topic on aggregates. So the province put out a notice on the environmental registry about changing the aggregate policy. Comments are due on September 25th, so not a lot of time to comment, and I think staff just felt it would be a good opportunity. Aggregates are a growing issue. I think there's a lot of great useful links. No shortage of information on aggregates. So we wanted to bring it forward to council in order to submit comments and just provide that background information. There's basically two processes that deal with aggregates. We have our zoning process where the county will ask for studies, we'll do the review. There was a recent application, I think within the last couple of months, that came before council, and then there's the Aggregate Review Act, which really looks at the site plan level and the details. So the ministry also has their requirements. So as part of that, they have no shortage of documents on their website on how they have to implement the Aggregate Resources Act. So they have an overall document that's fairly recent in 2023 that kind of outlines all the different studies they can ask, similar to the County of Brant. They also have policies and procedures that go into a little bit more detail. So those were last updated in 2006, so it's been quite a while. That predates source water protection. So basically what they're doing is they're trying to update those, provide more standards on, like, for the water report, how do we collect water, how do we determine the water table, updating the cultural heritage standards to current provincial standards. So I think a lot of it is good. There's a lot of different direction, and they should be updating these. So it has been 2006, so I think it's good news to update it. There's also a document it's a new document on matters that I guess OLT would be considered, so it's a good document. What does the province consider when they review an aggregate pit? Very similar to what the county. So I also think it provides a good opportunity to provide comments to the province. I'm not sure if they'll be considered, but I think it's a good opportunity. In terms of, they do require, I guess, what they determine as a maximum predicted water table. So they have to determine what is the water table. One of the biggest concerns is what is the impact hydrogeologically. And currently they only require 1 year of monitoring. And I mean, it typically takes a lot more than 1 year to go through the process to get a pit. So I've seen, it would be nice to see extended to 2 years, especially we're seeing more and more pits. What is the cumulative impacts? There's also a water report, so that kind of deals with the impacts on water quality and quantity, groundwater, surface water. So the county requires that for all our applications. So the province only requires it for below water extraction. So even if there was a provincially significant wetland or the Grand River, they wouldn't require it if extraction was above water. And then in terms of agricultural impact assessments, I think that's very important, especially in Brant. So the province only requires it if we were in a provincial plan area, so the Greenbelt or Oak Ridges Moraine. They will consider it if it is completed, but they don't require it, so I think they should be requiring it. I mean, the county can still, and I mean, most operators, the big operators, they do all these reports, they do the studies anyway, so it's a matter of kind of requesting that the province follow more of the best practices. And I guess finally, the recommendation I had was on cumulative effects. We're seeing more and more pits. How do we assess these cumulative effects? There's not really a lot of provincial direction. GRCA produced a report, I think, back in 2010. So I think myself as an environmental planner, it would be great to have some more direction on that. So that's a synopsis. So we're basically looking to submit comments to the province, including any additional comments that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get someone to put it on the floor so we can talk about it? Councillor Pierce and Councillor Coleman. Questions to the presenter? Councillor Miller.
A couple of questions, a couple comments. First question, I didn't read it in the report, Michelle, but is there any talk of maybe taking the appeals of this out of the OLT?
That was not part of the updates to the policies. The appeals, it does go to the Ontario Land, taking it out of the Ontario Lands Tribunal.
Okay, I thought I had heard that, but maybe I heard it wrong. Okay, that would be actually a good thing. I like the last one you mentioned about talking about accumulative effects, and I'll give you an example. In Caledon, they have quarries. I think that's slightly different from what we have here, the gravel pits per se. And they have they actually looked into it, and they have a lot of quarries up there, and the cumulative effect of the air quality, they determined it's actually quite negative for health, right? So they're looking at that, and there was another pit coming. Of course, they got a lot of pits, and they took that to the OLT. I think they were taking it because of the negative air quality. A lot of people upset, and actually won at the OLT, which was interesting. Not based on the air quality, but because it come out in that OLT hearing that they actually have enough pits open to supply 100 years worth of quarry material. So they said, you know what, let's open that maybe 50 years from now or something like that. So it's interesting. So I think as far as cumulative effects, I think you need to maybe address what you're referring to, and obviously all the problems associated with a pit, such as water, like water impacts, water use, traffic, and air quality. Because those haul routes, if you have a lot of pits opening up, you're going to have a lot more traffic, right? So I think in municipalities with multiple pits, this is what I'd be suggesting, but I think where you have multiple pits, like here, like Caledon, like Pushlinch, like North Dumfries, there should be permanent air monitoring, because it's becoming better and better known that, especially the older ones, they don't operate maybe with the same dust suppression that, say, a newer one might be. In areas too, you talk about agriculture, but I'd like to see more effort put into encouraging these pit operators not to go below the water table, or encouraging them to stay above the water table, depends how you look at it, especially where there's class 1 or 2 agricultural land. I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, when they go below the water table, it's the municipalities that lose at the end, because it's just a big pond that's really serves no purpose. And I don't know if this is where they do it, but if it were me and I was putting it in, I'd always ask for a substantial increase to the municipal levy to offset the road repairs required. But they've heard it a few times, but they've never really bumped it up too much. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Else have anything to Councillor Kyle?
Mr. Mayor, through you, one quick one for Michelle, and kind of along the lines of Councillor Miller's concerns with, maybe specifying some of that cumulative effect. Do you happen to know if if it would speak to specifics like whether or not they should have the gravel piles higher than berms and things like that? Because I know that's one of the concerns when we've been chatting with neighbors that are concerned about pits going in our ward. There's concern with the dust, to Councillor Miller's air quality point as well. So that was one of the things that this proposed pit was planning to do, is keep it below. And I've noticed driving around the county, there are some that are significantly higher. So is there anything that speaks to that, or could that be some sort of comment that we provide as well, just to try and keep some of that more nuisance stuff to a minimum if they are going to be there?
Yeah, through the chair. So in terms of the height, I don't know, like, there's provincial standards that speak to everything, like a 30-meter setback. I know one of the things that I notice in terms of pits is you drive through, if there's a concentration, you feel like you're surrounded by pits, and it's ugly. So I took some policies from the Niagara Escarpment, because I drive through there, I'm like, oh, you don't even notice there's a pit here, because it's so well screened. So one of the things that I look for is trying to plant up vegetation. You can have kind of waving berms. So in terms of that and the dust, trees are a great mitigator for dust, improving the aesthetics. In terms of below and above water, that's a long-standing, I guess, issue with aggregate pits, and that it's not a great idea. It's not good for municipalities. You can't return it back to agriculture. The Municipal Act, the Aggregate Act, the PPS have long ruled that municipalities have no authority on what they call vertical zoning. We can ask for the studies, we can maybe address it through water quality, but it is very difficult. The best thing you can do, I find, is public relations and trying to work with the aggregate operators to get the above water extraction.
Any other questions? So the recommendation is to have the report be submitted to the registry with Mayor Foxton's cell phone attached to it. With that being said, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Yes, we won't do the cell phone thing. She's an expert on gravel pits. She is. 12.3. Haley.
So good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm back to talk about natural gas again. So I just wanted to start by providing a brief introduction before we launch into questions and discussion on the report. So late last week, we were circulated an opportunity to provide feedback on a potential phase 3 for the natural gas expansion program. So as we reported on in the past, the natural gas expansion program is a provincial program that provides funding to expand natural gas servicing to areas that wouldn't be financially viable per the OEB standards. So after the last report we brought forward on this topic, council directed staff to continue to monitor available grants to support expansion projects. So with this prospective grant coming online, staff felt it was important to bring forward this report with the resolution and information with feedback to provide to the Ministry of Energy and Mines. So at this time, staff have prepared the attached resolution and report, and the intention in this report is to provide some information for council, but also to outline some of the county's key priorities to inform the next phase of this potential program design. So some of the priorities you'll see listed in the report in the analysis section include things like prioritizing equitable access to small rural communities, prioritizing the importance of affordability, recognizing the cost of living is a key concern for our residents, and then also looking at how we can support sustainable focused growth and complete communities throughout the county. So just wanted to bring forward this report and happy to answer any questions. And again, the intention, similar to Michelle's report, is that this report and the comments included would be forwarded and submitted to the ERO by September 22nd.
Okay, we'll get it on the floor for discussion. Councillor Kyle, Councillor Garneau. Any questions for Haley? Councillor Garneau?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through more of a comment, it was somewhat fortuitous that this came out on the agenda because in recent weeks I have been hearing from property owners in the Colborne East, McBay, Hammond Road areas, loosely Langford, and Adam and I had been going back and forth over email about this. I think we're moving in the right direction. What I wanted to sort of suggest is that our report, if that's to be our comments, certainly references Glen Morris and Harley, but that we also don't leave out these residents. It's my understanding that there's a petition that has a fairly significant number of property owners signing it, but also that the timeline of how this consultation, through no fault of our own, has unfolded didn't allow them to sufficiently mobilize in time to make it here tonight. So I wonder if we can make sure, should the report be the only document we send, that somehow we find a way to include that area as a potential priority for us as well, please.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Garneau, yes, that's definitely something that's on our radar and is kind of included in the report, recognizing kind of these smaller rural pockets that are coming forward. So at this time, it's just an engagement on this potential third phase. Once we get to a point where there's actually a third phase, if it does come to fruition, that will be a great time to kind of take stock of these different communities and ensure Enbridge is aware of all of the different pockets of the community that are interested in expansion.
Thank you, because I think from the residents' perspective, because they don't have a defined community identity, they were worried that they might get left behind in the consultation. Thank you.
Councillor Garneau, just for my own, you said 3 communities. Which one's the petition attached to?
So they're residents, sorry, I should say property owners within the Colburn East, McBay, Hammond Road kind of corridor, but
okay,
largely lacking a community name these days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Oakley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to speak in opposition of this recommendation. I'll be voting against it. It's largely predicated on the government of Ontario directing that investment in natural gas is the way to go, which is in direct contradiction to the recommendation of the Independent Ontario Energy Board, I believe it was 2 years ago now. And I think the Ontario Energy Board had things exactly correct in that this is an investment in a dated technology that in the long run is going to cause have severe environmental implications, as well as in long-term costing our residents more money. So I will not be supporting this because there are other technologies that should be invested in, not natural gas.
Councillor Miller?
I think you know how I feel about this. I just want to point out, highlight a sentence that Haley put in the report. It says, at times the electrical grid in rural areas can be unreliable. And since the last time, Haley, you were up there talking about natural gas, that was before our August shutdown. I feel like the gods of the electrical gods have really been out to get us because it has been a terrible summer for power outages, and there's been a lot of food thrown away. I know at one point the county was looking at opening up a cooling center because it was hot and humid in the power about 24 hours. And in Scotland, Councillor Garneau and I were talking to one resident who said every other house on their street has gotten a natural gas generator because the power outages in Scotland were just terrible. So I can't stress enough how important it is for, a good electrical grid. We don't have that yet, and I think natural gas could certainly help fill that gap. If I look at Stubby's out in New Durham, they actually run their own generator off natural gas because the cost to bring in the extra power to run their facilities was just exorbitant. So they went with natural gas generator on site. So natural gas isn't just for heating homes, as we know. It can be used for hot water and for so many other things. So yeah, fully support it.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 13, communications, we have done resolutions, we have done other business. I didn't ask at the beginning of the meeting, does anyone have anything they want to throw in there really quickly for other business? Councillor Chambers?
I just have one quick thing. When I arrived at my desk this evening, there was a letter hand addressed, Mr. R. Chambers, Ward 4 Councillor, County of Brant Council, 66 Grand River Street North, Paris, Ontario, etc., and was received on August 2nd by the County of Brant. Very nice that someone took the time to write a letter handwritten to me. But what concerned me was, when I got here, it was opened. So my question is it routine for staff to open councillors' mail?
Councillor Chambers, I can only tell you that when I became the mayor, everything I got was opened, and I asked to have it not opened, and now it's not opened.
Could I ask that anything addressed to me personally that comes to the county office not be opened?
Yes.
Because it's mine, not theirs?
That's right. And that's how I felt too, and I had handwritten letters. Not most of them weren't signed, and they were ticking a little bit, but they were still opened, and I didn't like that. So what the protocol is now is they don't open them, they dip them in water, and then they put them on my desk. So maybe what we can do is put something together for staff so that we can bring it back to council. So maybe it's a policy. Councillor Pierce?
Yeah, that's news to me too. Yeah, that I'm curious as to why that would happen myself.
I don't know why it happens, but it happened all the time when I first became the mayor. And it happened for about a year, and then I thought, I don't like that. So I just asked them not to do it anymore, and they don't do it now. Councillor Oakley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think just to sort of comment on perhaps the possible motivation for this, I would think that it's probably likely to, the joke that you had made, but, you know, a safety concern with the mail potentially. But whether or not we feel it's necessary to do is another thing, but I think there's more than reasonable explanation for it, which would be a safety element.
Yeah, so we can maybe ask staff why it's done like that, but mine aren't opened anymore. So.
Hopefully mine won't be either.
But they're also not signed and they're usually wet, so. So there you go. So we'll ask staff why that happens, and maybe, as I said, we'll ask them to create a policy if it's the will of council not to open our mail if it's personally addressed to us. Anyway, thank you. Any other new business or concerns or comments? Seeing none, we'll go to number 16, which is to go in camera, and Councillor Garneau is going to take us there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that the County Brant Council convene in camera to discuss Section 239, subsection 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, RPT-0316-25, minor reorganization from our CAO.
Thank you. All those in favor? We're going to go in camera, and Okay, I believe we're back in open session, and we're going to ratify. Who has that? Councillor Pierce?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that a new position of Manager of Communications and Operations be created and funded from the capital budget, and that the Development Liaison position be evolved into Government Relations Specialist.
Yeah. Everyone's clear? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Takes us to number 17 on the agenda, which is the bylaws. There's only one bylaw. Councillor McAlpine, you're going to read them. Read it.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Coleman, that the following bylaw be read the first time, bylaw number 92-25, being bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council.
All those in favor of the first reading? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, please, Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Coleman that the following bylaw be read a second time with all preambles and clauses be adopted. Bylaw number 92-25 being bylaw confirm the proceedings of council.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the second reading of the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. And if you could just do it for the third time, please, Councillor McAlpine.
Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman that the following bylaw be read a third time, passed, signed, and executed by law number 92-25 being bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council.
Thank you. All those in favor of the third reading of the bylaw? Opposed and carried, which takes us to number 18 on the agenda, which is the next meeting and adjournment. Is there anything else before we adjourn for the betterment of the county of Brant? Councillor Miller.
A quick question then. Pam has moved on. There's some events that are scheduled. I haven't really written them down. Who do I check with to find out when these things are?
Okay.
Through your worship, any questions like that, if you just would want to email clarks@brant.ca, and then we'll be able to address any of the events information, anything like that.
Okay. And just so everybody knows, there's a big yard sale in Burford this Saturday, so.
What did you say?
Yard sale in Burford this Saturday, so.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of tricky right now because without Pam, because some people invite me to things on Facebook and some people invite me on emails, and so I don't even know. I mean, I don't know what's going on half the time. But the clerks are stepping in and they're all doing different parts of things for me. So in turn, that will be for you too. But we have interviews scheduled for later on this week. We had a lot of people, we had 40 people apply. And yeah, we got it down to, I think, 6 or 7 right now. So hopefully we'll have it all tied up by, I'd like to have it done by Friday, but probably I'll have to call people in for the second interview. So hopefully by the middle of next week. And they'll have to give their notice and they'll be coming and starting on October 1st, I hope. And Spencer's back today from his honeymoon, and we're glad to have him back. He went to Alaska, and he's back, and I'm glad he's back. So with that being said, I need someone to let us go. Councillor Kyle. All those in favor?